machine. Salute Toussaint and Dessalines. And I do love France, know what I mean? It's a system I'm talking, nobody's agreeing. They say it's suicide when dead bodies are swinging. Cowards are hunting black men, that's what I'm seeing. How many toasters have been burnt down? And once Central Park was a thriving black town. Yo, Chuck, I'm fighting the power right now thanks to you, Flav and P.E. Putting it down, putting your life on the line so I can rap now. The next generation still singing fight the power.
Fight the power! 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 We got to fight the powers that be.
Police think they weighing 6'9" over the law. Wanna give us short sticks, but we really need a long. To the boys in the hood, ducking bullets and batons. From boys in the hood, triple K's on their arm. 4 fingers on my palm, screaming fight. Change the policy, defund, buy back our property. You love Black Panther, but not Fred Hampton. Word to the Howards and the Aggies and the Hamptons. They book us, won't book us. I'm Booker. T. Washington, George Kill for 20. Think about it. That's 2,000 pennies. The value black life, the cost of going to Wendy's for a 4-quarter burger. Ended in murder. Fight for Brianna and the pain of her mama. Gotta fight
the power. Fight the power. Fight the power. Fight the power. Fight the power. Fight the power. Fight the power. We got to fight the powers that be.
Yeah, generations is how long we've been at war. The revolution on all platforms. You break a man's mind in his back door. Solidarity is what I'm wearing all black for. For comrades who don't fought without me. It's not to try and change our thoughts about me or to redirect your reports about me. Dear white people, you should take a course about me. Cause is it the long 4-finger ring? The sciences of the arts, the songs we can sing. I really wanna know why y'all so scared. Probably cause the promised land we almost scared. But look, I think of images that fuel my youth. Interviews by Craig Hodges and Abdul Raouf. Examples like Olympic black power salutes and Panther truths. I saw as I pursued my truth. If racism is a cancer, black thought's the answer. Gotta get up off the back porch. Emancipate your mind. Get your bodies back from ransom. Come on! And all black hands up for the anthem.
Fight the power! Fight the power! Fight the power!
Yo, check this out, man.
Bring that beat back, man. 2, 3, 4, hit it.
People, stronger than this evil. Smashing your power structure, melanin royal regal. System designed to kill and unprotect. Worldwide hit the streets just to get some respect. Our fight and our rights for freedom will never waver. Justice Breonna Taylor, salute Chuck and Flavor. Feel the same anger since Radio Raheem died. Black power to the people, push forward pride.
Fight the power like it's an octo. Born to fight, I made it off the block though. Thought he had a gun and he was black, that's the combo. The police killed George having the convo. They killed Malcolm X, they killed Dr. King. They gave us guns and dope, they wanna stop our kings. Trying to erase our history, stop and think. History class ain't tell us about Juneteenth. Cops don't give a damn about a Negro. Pull a trigger, kill a nigga, he's a key, bro. Both living life on welfare. The last one who cared was Obamacare, round 12. Nose kinda bloody, gotta keep fighting. Trump through the North Korea, they respect violence. If you ain't trying to have your city on fire for some respect on our name, we come from gold and diamonds.
Fight the power! Fight the power! Fight the power! We got to fight the powers that be. Elvis was a hero the most, but he never meant to me. You see, straight up racist, the sucker was simple and plain. Cause I'm black and I'm proud, I'm ready, I'm hyper, I'm amped. Most of my heroes don't appear no stamp. Sample all look like you look and find nothing but Reginald for 400 years if you check.
Don't worry, be happy.
Was a #1 jam. Damn if I said you could slap me right here. Get it.
Let's get this party started right.
Right on, come on. What we got to say? Power to the people, no delay. Make everybody see. In order to fight the powers that be.
Ready? Good afternoon and welcome to a Monday edition of Ask Mathis. I'm your host, Reginald Mathis, and rocking with me is my brother, Wildman Teddy T, a.k.a. Burn the Mountain Builder.
Yes. We're in the building. It's the last week of February, moving right along.
Right, exactly. See how easy that was? Teddy T? See, we don't even discuss what other people discuss in February. We don't even acknowledge that. You know what I'm saying? Because every day is our day. You know, and this is the Ask Mathis show, as always, brought to you by X1 Adjusters and Henry Bean. If you got any kind of issues going on with the crib, weather related, tree done fell on your roof, somebody done drove into your car, into your house, under your shed, any of that stuff, give them a call. Flooding, they give you a free estimate. That's my brother Henry Bean, man. Y'all make sure y'all check that out, man. And of course, man, you know, coming up for you today, we got a very, very special guest going to come to you shortly. None other than my brother, George Bernard Walker Jr., Vice President for Planned Parenthood, diversity, and, you know, equality and all that stuff, man. So, you know, we're gonna take it back a little bit, man. But before we get into that, so the Boeing 777, man, is experiencing difficulties and issues again. So Denver, man, they had to turn around and come back because engine failure. You know, shout out to that captain, man, who if you listen to his telecommunication, you know, he was very, very calm under fire, you know, which is what most pilots, man, you see are. And so Japan, man, they weren't, you know, they wasn't waiting for anybody. So Japan already said, "Oh, it's a wrap. No more 777s here in Japan. It's a wrap." So Boeing, man, who's just coming off of a really, 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 really tough year, man. So I don't know, man. Those Boeing. So look out for that. And of course, man, we started the.
See that fire?
Yeah, man.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and the debris. Did you see some of the debris that fell?
In front of the lady's
that was
house.
Yeah, right in front of
big engine.
right in front of the lady's crib, man. So fortunately, there were no fatalities with that. So also, it begins the confirmation hearings for Attorney General nominee Merrick Garland. You familiar with that name, DJ Newkirk or
Yes,
Teddy
sir.
T? Where you familiar with that name from?
Was he just elected Supreme Court by Donald Trump?
No.
No.
He's going for the Attorney General right now. He's going to be.
He's going for it right now. But
yeah,
I
before
think Teddy,
he was supposed to, not Trump, but Obama tried to get him elected as a Supreme Court.
He was nominated. Yeah. He was nominated by President Obama a year before he left office. And Mitch McConnell and the Republicans said, "Nah, we're not even going to give you a hearing. We're not even going to give you a hearing." And then we saw, fast forward to Amy Coney Barrett. She got confirmed in 8 days.
Just like that.
In 8 days. So that just
half
lets
the qualifications,
you know
like a quarter of the qualifications.
Bruh, and so I was watching the hearings this morning. You know, bruh is so smooth with it. You know, he answered some questions, man. I definitely took a page because he's on the Circuit Court of Appeals right now. So he's a judge.
Now.
Yeah, that's live. So he's on the Circuit Court of Appeals for D.C. right now. And what was so smooth about some of the questions that were posed to him, he just said, "Well, you know, I can talk to you when, you know, Second Amendment." He was like, "What's your opinion on the Second Amendment as far as the right to bear arms?" He was like, "Yeah, I think the Heller decision, you know, pretty much sums it up. You know, I follow the Heller decision. We haven't had much guidance under that, which says, you know, constitutionally protected right to bear arms. However, there can be some limitations put upon, which is, I think, sensible, because of what they were trying to get him to say is, you know, that President Biden is in favor of an assault weapons ban. So you got, you know, Ted Cruz and basically all the Second Amendment NRA Republicans, you know, who are basically coming out saying, "No, you know, we don't want any ban on assault weapons, background checks, or any of that stuff. So are you going to be able to enforce?" And what he said was smooth, which I think everyone can take a page out of his book, which is simply, well, you know, as you know, the president certainly has his opinion and what he wants to do. And as his, chief law enforcement, it would be the Department of Justice that will pursue those policies. So, if that's what it is, that's what it is. If there's some legislation, we gonna follow the law. And then they was trying to get them on the FISA courts, and of course the FISA courts, folks is still trying to relitigate Hillary Clinton, although she has not won for quite a long time. She lost, but that still dossier which put all the pressure on Donald Trump, and all the stuff that he supposedly, allegedly did in Russia, in Moscow, during the Miss Universe, where supposedly he, had a golden shower in the same room that President Obama stayed in. But, that's speculation and conjecture and hearsay, but that's still dossier. Folks still mad about that. But I'm going to tell you one thing that just happened today. Guess what? The Supreme Court just ruled on, Teddy T. What folks been waiting on since 2015 that the president never disclosed? Drum roll, please.
His taxes.
His taxes. His taxes. So, the grand jury in New York will get the president's taxes to see whether or not he's done anything untoward. So be on the lookout for those taxes. It's going to be a minute, before one of those New York Times reporters, Maggie Haberman, or one of those New York, Times reporter get up in there and find out the details. I would not be surprised if we had that information by the end of the week.
Right? They're good.
By the end of the week. Because, grand jury proceedings are confidential. So I would not be surprised, if that's the case. So, looking at the current spread, one of the things, with the president having been in office for a month, his number one goal, outside of, trying to heal the soul of the American people, was to get COVID under control. And it looks like by pretty much every objective standard that's out there, the death rates are falling, the amount of people who are contracting the virus is falling, and it seems that more people are, wearing masks and social distancing. So that's that's something where it lets you. I think it shows all of us that leadership at the top has an effect, even though there's no specific law where there can be a federal mandate or anything like that. But when you have a person who we all feel has all the information at his disposal to the world, and if he's not wearing a mask, then why I gotta wear a mask? Right. So that just lets you know, man, that leadership counts. It definitely counts for something, and
people need it. Some people definitely need leadership. People need to follow somebody. Some people do. Some people aren't just born leaders.
Absolutely. And big shout out to Dr. Fauci, man. It seems like he's just had a catharsis, man. He's just running around there, just God is trying to tell you something, bro. He's just running around here. Just like, man, I'm free to speak the facts and see what it is. I'm free. He around here saying, guess what? Looks like we're going to be wearing masks in the 2022. Now they're talking about it might just be part of the new normal where we may have to, wear masks like during the flu season, going forward. Because these airborne flus, supposedly this is just the start. This is just the beginning. So, we're going to see. We're going to see what's going on with that. Internationally, man, and I'm, trying to get these stories out the way before we bring in my brother, the great George Bernard Walker Jr. They telling me to go light on him, okay? So I'm going to go light. I'm going to go light on him. I get it. I understand. You know what I mean? When you get those calls, man, right before you go on the air, by the manager, by the chief of staff. They like, yeah, we, no subject is off limits, but you mind going over what you're gonna go over with them, please? I said, man. I said, you know what? I'm gonna keep it light, man, cause I appreciate the brother, man. He don't do anything, lightly. You know what I mean? He don't do anything lightly. You gotta be vetted. You gotta vet you. You gotta make sure it's cool. You gotta probably watch about 8-9 episodes, see the consistency. They was worried about you, Teddy, man. They was saying, man, can you get some? Teddy, they was like, can't control Teddy. Can't control Teddy T. Can't control Teddy T, please. I said, Teddy will be on his best behavior. Teddy be on his best behavior. So I want to mention Iran. Y'all know that Iran, man, they pushing it to the limit right now. Because they know they know President Biden wants to get back into, the Iran nuclear deal. And so Iran, man, they just like, they just like, man, y'all see what your boy did. You see what your boy did. You see what your boy did. So they retaliate just like gangsters. They over there retaliating. They still mad about Banyani killing him and killed their number one nuclear guy. And they running around here, enhancing uranium, way beyond the levels that they supposed to. Now they telling the IAEA inspectors, y'all window is closing. So they trying to put that pressure on the inspectors because they feel that, Joe Biden wants to, get back into this nuclear deal. And but you know what? We always keep it 1,000, right? That's what people expect us to do. That nuclear deal that we entered into under President Obama, man, it wasn't so great. And I'm not even talking about the money. I was cool with the money because it was their money. Unlike the narrative saying that, we gave them hundreds of millions of dollars. That was their money. That was frozen. Do you feel like if the IRS come and freeze your account and then one day you able to get your money back, that is anybody's money other than yours? Do you ever forget about that money? So what makes you think Iran was going to forget about that money? So they was like, hey, in negotiating this right here, we getting our money back. And yeah, y'all can come in and inspect and we'll get rid of all our plutonium and uranium and we won't be enriching it. We'll do all those things. And next thing you know, Trump comes in, he gets out of the deal, goes and kills a top nuclear visionary. And now Iran is like, no, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? Well, we want you to go back into the deal. No, man. We can't just do that. We can't. No, bro.
They're trying to get something out of it.
Yeah, the sanctions. They trying to get them sanctions lifted because, Trump tried to bring them down to their knees with the sanctions. But what I do, agree with the Trump administration when it comes to Iran is that they didn't say anything about, the non-nuclear weapons, the ballistic missiles that Iran has. And Iran, is like the chief sponsor of Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these other terrorist organizations. So I think, we all need to come to the table, not only get them back in this nuclear deal, but we need to, put a halt to, some of the other warmongering things that, that they own. So, looking at my Gucci, it's about that time. Okay. All right.
You may want to text him.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't.
I can't text him. I'm on the line. But I would just ask, because I saw that he was, he was on just checking us out, again, always doing his research, before to come in. I would say, Brother Walker, if you check your email, you will have the Zoom link to come on to the show. And while we're waiting him to Zoom on in, Brother Newkirk, why don't you tell us where you been, man?
Oh, here you go. He's it.
Okay, bam, bam.
He's a ride.
All right, and just like that, we have the George Bernard Walker Jr. Welcome to Ask Mathis, my brother.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you looking real light skinned, bro. What's up? You been
The light is right
inside.
above my head.
I'm like, what you done throw some makeup, bro? I'm like, hold on, I remember you being that light, bro.
No, because I'm not. You know I'm not.
No, that's what it is, man.
This
I'm
has been
so
great. I've been listening as you're calling me out there. It's nice to finally be a part of this. I'm excited.
it is. So when you talk about, Planned Parenthood, we hear so much about it, and I know we're not going to get into the politics of it, but can you just give the people out there, what Planned Parenthood is that is more than just abortions?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. So I think away from me, please. Um, and I'm talking with my hat on as your line brother,
Okay.
and not necessarily as an official spokesperson. Although I am really honored and privileged to be working for Planned Parenthood. For me, it really is about care for everybody. And one of the things that I have learned, certainly in the on 3 years now that I've been working in this capacity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has really shown me like there's so many other issues like healthcare. Abortion care absolutely is a care that is provided. That is one piece of a whole puzzle of wholeness. So when people go into our affiliates or go in and access care, they're getting care, frankly, around any number of things: cancers, cerebral cancers, early diagnosis. One of the things I've learned since being at Planned Parenthood is how many of my friends and women I went to school with, or who were at Spelman, we were at Morehouse, who said they went to get care and to learn, and they learned very early about something was going wrong in terms of their own health care, and they were able to get it addressed. I mean, that's huge. I mean, we have a lot of young people who who have questions about their sexual health, and those are the other answers. Breast cancers, huge. And when you think about disproportionate communities that are really affected by some of these illnesses, to know that there is an organization that stands out to make sure that no matter what community you're in, you can get the health care you need. I mean, that's just been incredible for me.
Excellent, excellent. I first learned of Planned Parenthood in college because it really
Oh wow, okay,
provided a lot of healthcare and a lot of services for a lot of a lot of the students, in
yeah,
Atlanta, and I never questioned or found out what they did, but I just knew like they provided mammograms, and folks would
yep,
go in and get their you know yearly annual checkups, and um, birth control, and just other things to just keep the train moving. And I wasn't really aware of the cancer and some of the other screenings that they provided.
yep,
But
yeah,
speaking of Atlanta, and you mentioned Morehouse and Spelman, you had the unique opportunity to work directly with former President Barack Obama in the HBCU initiative. Can you expound upon that somewhat? How you got involved?
yeah. So thank you for asking about that. That was for me, as I think about it. So I served on the White House initiatives for HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, under President Obama, starting in 12. And I was on, so 2012 through 16. It was truly the honor of my lifetime. As you know, I had been working in nonprofits, and I had been someone who, living in Washington, D.C., paid attention to politics. I had, in my former job, worked on a presidential appointments project, and we advocated for, and it was an LGBT appointments project, which is actually still in existence. And we advocated for looking at the White House and looking at all of these different appointed positions as a way to make sure that truly inclusion represented everybody. And so it was Obama's mission on all of his boards, on all of his commissions. I mean, not only was he bipartisan in terms of Republican and Democrat, but he was also really thoughtful about saying, what are the different voices for all of these different boards? So, for example, if you're looking at a housing board, and like there's several. So on this housing board, making sure that there is a broad perspective of views. So it's one thing to say what public housing should do if you live in your own house that's bought and paid for, even if you're carrying a mortgage on it. It's a very different conversation if the circumstances of your life mean you're living in public housing. And he was actually really intentional about saying who is the most affected and what voice do they have in some of these conversations, even stuff about water and some of the conversations you've heard about the environment. And this is why these things are continue to come back up. Because in my opinion, uh, I think a lot of that was lost in the conversation over the last 4 years. And that's why you're seeing all of these different opportunities to say, how do we get these voices back? For me, because I was working on those appointments, I got to meet different people. And someone actually recommended, George, you have a unique position as an ordained UCC minister, as someone who loves Morehouse and is, a big fan of HBCUs. My mom had gone to Tennessee State, and I had other family members at HBCUs. Um, it was that passion. It was the passion of a religious perspective, and frankly, being a leader in LGBT work. At that time, leading a leadership initiative with the Victory Fund or the Victory Institute, which was the 501c3 side of it. Um, I was recognized. It was again an incredible opportunity. Betting is really hard. You don't know how all these things are going to turn out when someone says, "Do you want to throw your hat in for an appointment?" And I couldn't tell anybody. It had to be really quiet because part of how all of this works is they also don't put people on boards who are going to embarrass the president. So they go through their vetting and all of that. And it was, I mean, media and we say and do is certainly much more prominent now than it was even in 2012. But through that, I had the opportunity to sit with not just HBCU presidents, but also with other business leaders in the community who had been selected by the appointment. I mean, I met some really, really cool folks. And without doing a lot of name dropping about all of that, the thing that was really unique for me was also understanding the power and the richness of the HBCU story. I'm a history major. I had also been personally interested in the story of HBCUs. I grew up in Memphis, as you know, and I understood where HBCUs were in a bunch of places. What I didn't understand was that if you don't have a historically black college in these places like Talladega or Tougaloo or some of these small towns, you didn't have a black middle class, like full stop. If you didn't have a Miles College or these other schools that don't get necessarily the same sort of big play that Morehouse Howard get, you didn't have a black middle class. Those were feeding ground and training places for our most talented folks to go through, to learn, and to be trained to be able to help their communities in medicine, in education, in the sciences, and even in the liberal arts. I mean, you think about Ruth Simmons, who's now the president of UANM. Ruth is a graduate of Prairie View, and she went on to graduate school and went to a couple of Ivy Leagues, and she ended up being the first black president of Smith College in Massachusetts, and that's actually where I got a chance to meet her. And her son was just a couple of years behind us at Morehouse. But then she also was the first black president of Brown University. Right. And you think about her trajectory. She was a French major. And she talks about this often, and I recently heard her talking about it because Prairie View also just got one of um, 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 the big awards from Mackenzie Scott, who's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. And I think Prairie View got $50 million. Um, but just because she had already been in a trajectory to understand the value of HBCUs, she came back to Prairie View to help strengthen the school. She didn't take the job of being the president. She was already in retirement. She took the job because of the love of the school and her commitment to education. But just because of her different points of influence, her leverage, and her profile, and what that does for Prairie View in Texas. Like, you think about like just, and this is just a really quick journey, right? Like, and there's so many stories like that where HBCUs have really made a
Right.
difference.
You look at the sister from Spelman who was CEO of Starbucks, and she
Oh
just
yeah,
left to head.
absolutely. She's now been named to be the CEO of, she was the COO of Starbucks and now the CEO of Walgreens. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Ross Brewer.
Right.
Um,
So I was going to
Funny you
ask
mentioned
you.
that actually. I had an opportunity to speak with Ross once when this was in a job a couple of years ago. Um, and she gave me a couple of minutes, maybe 30 minutes, at the behest of another Spelman sister who had worked with her on the board. And I'll never forget that conversation, not so much for what she said, but how she made me feel.
Mm,
And it
that's
was
Maya
really
Angelou.
important
Okay.
to have someone who understood a little bit about my perspective, who I was, to encourage me in work that was developing. So now I lead diversity, equity, and inclusion. And at the time, that's not that wasn't the job I was looking at. But I told her this is what I wanted to do. This is the work I wanted to do, and she believed in it early. Um, that to me is something that I've just never forgotten. And while I've never gotten a chance to formally thank her in some big way, I will never forget how she made me feel. And that was because she understood the connection of what it takes at an HBCU in terms of, and particularly she knew a little bit more about my story at Morehouse, but she really got the mentorship, the coaching, the executive presence, the things that you get in a smaller liberal arts school that you may not get in a in a school where you may be smaller in number, but certainly don't have the same kind of profile you can have at a Morehouse or you know
Right.
any other HBCUs.
Right. Right. Shout out to you and to the HBCUs, and brother Walker. When you look at you know the last administration, you know, which indicated that we funded HBCUs for 10 years. Um, Tell us the truth about that versus the work that you guys put in, because my belief was that there was no board. You were on the initial board, and once you were on that board, you guys kind of laid the path work so that once the legislation or the time to
Yeah.
fund it came along, they just, oh well, here we're going to fund it for 10 years, and
Yeah.
so can you
So, I
speak on
mean,
that?
to keep it real, the HBCU initiative has been in the White House at different points, actually going back, I think, gosh, not Nixon, but it's gone back pretty far. And Dr. Harvey, who was the chair of the board when I was on the board, who's the president of Hampton, who's recently announced his retirement. But Dr. Harvey had actually been on some of the earlier boards, and it had been the initiative had been in different parts. So in some administrations it had been education department, and in some administrations it had been in the office of the president. Um, it kind of depended on the weight of the president, like how much credence the department got, or how much push it got, or even funding or support it got. What I will say, and this is in my opinion,
Mm,
kind of felt like we did some pretty amazing work um, when I was on the board in terms of looking at the infrastructure and impact. One of the hard things that we definitely had to see was the work that had happened with with the Parent Plus loan. That was something that was under Obama. That was a big deal, and it was a bit of a struggle. And as the board, we didn't have we didn't have ultimate responsibility on saying this is exactly what you have to do. We were a advisory board, right? So we didn't set the policy, but we could certainly respond. But that was a really interesting thing because the Parent Plus loan got stopped during the administration. It happened kind of abruptly. There was a lot of concern about, oh my gosh, what is that going to mean in terms of parents who were borrowing money to send their kids to school? And while it wasn't just HBCUs, bless you, disproportionately, we knew that HBCU students would definitely be impacted by it. On the other side of that was we had just gotten out of the housing crisis, and we saw that predatory lending had just destroyed the wealth of so many Black families, particularly in housing. I mean, bankruptcies were out, the story. And one of the things we were doing was making the connection between, you can't just sort of quickly stop a program that's supporting people with education, but we were also aware that the balance to that was you also didn't want families to be in a position where they were taking loans that they couldn't afford to pay back, particularly if part of the crisis was that people weren't going to graduate. This is one thing to pay for a lot of education, but actually to have a degree on the other end. This school debt issue is obviously not just HBCUs, but that's something that certainly I think that this administration will be paying a lot more attention to.
That's part of the debate.
Questions about it.
That's part of the debate right now for the proposed $1.9 trillion plan, and for some folks advocating getting rid of $50,000 in debt, and others advocating just $10,000. And what they're saying is that the folks who pretty much are doing okay are the ones who have over $50,000 worth of debt, but they graduated and they have the degrees and they have the earning capacity to try to pay it back. But the issue is for those who took out those loans but did not finish, that's an albatross around their necks that's preventing them from moving forward.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, like even in terms of when we went to school, I was very fortunate. I didn't have undergraduate debt. I did have some debt from going to divinity school when I went to Duke. Not proportionally, not a whole lot of debt, but I did have some debt. And I think about that all the time because I also went to a school where when there was debt, there were so many opportunities for me to do work study, to get out of some of the debt, so I could pay some things down. Because I went to divinity school straight from undergrad. And what I noticed, even without a lot of political analyzing, was to take that in a place where you literally are going to have so much more cushion in terms of making sure you get launched to that next place. So, I don't even remember what the amount was now, but I was in a place where I knew that whatever I did going forward, I'd be able to have the credentials or the job prospects to be able to get rid of the debt. That's not always the case for a lot of, particularly our HBCUs. And so I do think that there is a balance that folks have got to look at. And that's where the equity comes into these conversations in a way that I don't think we always focused on. You talk about diversity, but diversity is just everybody. That's easy. Mm-hmm. We all get that there's diversity. I mean, you and I are a whole lot of ways diverse that may or may not be obvious to anybody else.
Right.
The inclusion, how we talk to each other, how we want to bring each other in is another thing. But then the equity, like what do you need that's going to be different than what I need that literally our systems should be able to provide for?
Yeah,
and that's the difference.
So two more things about HBCU, and then we're going to go backwards a little bit more. So we're going from more recent to backwards. So, what did the Trump administration do when they're bragging about what they did for the funding for the 10 years? Like, was that in any way connected to your work as far as them funding it for 10 years, or we're talking apples and oranges?
That was afterwards, and I'll be honest with you. I've seen some of the things that he's taking credit for, the administration is taking credit for, and I'm an optimistic, half full kind of guy, um, and I haven't heard anything that made me think, okay, that's just completely off mark.
Okay.
What I have heard, because I do think they had a different approach in terms of some of the funding. I'm not as familiar, frankly, with how they realigned the money. Um, so I kind of don't want to step too fast into saying whatever you
Right.
said,
No. Hey,
because a friend of mine reminded me of a broke clock is no, a stopped clock, not a broken
it's
clock,
right
but a
twice a day.
stopped clock is right twice a day. So
Right.
there may have been some right in some of those policies. Um, I will say this: I think that it was hard just because of some of the other administration stances, or particularly those in HBCU community, to not look with side eye at anything that was coming, because it felt like so much was loaded with other things that are intersectionally also a means to how we survive. So it's one thing if you did something good for HBCUs, great, glad of that.
Right.
But if you're killing us on housing,
Right.
policing quite literally,
Mm-hmm.
or any of the other structures that around, around the education, it's kind of like, okay, so you're going to give to one hand and then take away with two more hands.
Mm.
Um, so that would be my jaundice,
Okay.
sort of humble opinion.
Right. And then finally, bro, just in terms of the HBCU, everyone is aware now. Vice President Kamala Harris, attended Howard. Senator Raphael Warnock attended Morehouse. So it
He's my
seems
classmate.
okay, class of '91. That's what's up. So it seems like everyone is, saying, "Oh wow, these HBCUs." But just from a historical perspective, um, why would you recommend that young folks consider an HBCU and do, quite frankly, what we did? I recall, being back at Morehouse and the professors saying, "Hey, you come here, you get that pride instilled in you," and I had never really been around that number of, equally intelligent black men, as I did when I came to Morehouse. So it really changed my outlook, just on our people, because that
Yeah,
wasn't really, what I'd experienced. So coming around, getting around other people, and just seeing other folks who can do it just like you, and they were saying, okay, if you do well here, you should not have to pay for grad school. You come to
right.
HBCU. If you do well here, you probably won't have to pay for grad school. And
Yeah, yeah.
I found that to be the
So
case.
I certainly did. I mean, was fortunate not just to go to Duke. I also went to Georgetown for a certificate program. And what I noticed is I would sit in these other schools and see, like, overwhelmingly the majority of people of color, and particularly African Americans or people who identify as Black, were HBCU grads. And I do think that what you spoke to in terms of the community being able to sort of, you know, get tested within folks who are, there's nothing like knowing you are smart amongst a whole bunch of other smart people. And when those other smart people look like you, because the other secret is, I mean, particularly the experience at Morehouse was that most of us, at least when I was in school, were coming from all black situations. I mean, I didn't. I came from Catholic school in Memphis, and while there was a nice percentage of black folks in school, I remember, and I was just recounting this to someone, I had to lobby. I was the president of our class, and I had to lobby for the black students to be able to go to the HBCU recruitment day, because the school said, well, we'll let you go to the Catholic day and you can go to the other day because there's a whole recruiting for Catholic universities, of course. But, they didn't include HBCUs. I don't think people were hostile to it. It just hadn't come up in the way that I was like, no, absolutely. We have to have time off to be able to go see what these HBCUs offer. I would still say to any young person who was thinking about an HBCU or to their parent, because there's sometimes, particularly when you think about the funding, that's a real part of it. It's not about going to an HBCU to shut yourself off from other people. The truth is, you're going to get plenty of experience with other people, and you probably have before you even got to the campus of any HBCU. That's not what this is about. It's about getting into a place where the whole of you can be seen. Reggie, another thing that I've actually had this conversation with, particularly with friends of mine who now are more well to do. And one of the things they say is who've gone to HBCUs but are much more open to their kids going to other places. And I say, well, listen, I get that when you have options, and HBCU may not be your only option. And if perhaps, if you want a very specific science, for example, you may not necessarily get that in an undergraduate program. I mean, depending, I think most of them are covered, but let's go with that. What we do at HBCUs is actually prepare you to be a thinker and to be nuanced and balanced. And the truth is, if you don't have a sense of who you are, when you show up in these other environments, you absolutely will not be ready. It just won't happen. And so where I think that HBCUs are absolute money well over, and to your point, all these leaders are now showing up and people are going, oh my goodness, let's look at HBCUs again. It's like, well, I think we knew something they didn't know before.
Yeah.
It's like you don't need to go outside of your own people sometimes to learn a whole lot more about the diversity even within your own people.
No, absolutely. And if you recall, we had the 97 Alpha Rho meeting, a few weeks ago. One of the brothers came in and said something that I wasn't aware of, which speaks to your point, which is when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, you had all these brothers who had options, as you mentioned, who came to Morehouse specifically because that's where Dr. King had attended. And so you had, other folks who may have attended Ivy League schools who decided to make a point to go specifically to Morehouse. And that's similar to what we're, kind of spearheading down here with regards to athletics, and maybe encouraging some of our blue chippers to consider going to HBCUs because, if you have the NBA talent, for instance, it's still required that you go play a year, in college. And if, LeBron could have come to Morehouse for his year, but back then he could still go from high school. But let's say if we had the new LeBron that was coming out right now, wouldn't it be something to encourage him to go to a Morehouse or Florida A&M or a Hampton, or Central State, just to showcase, for that year, and maybe be, a Harold Ellis, to make it to the NBA. But I wanted to talk a little bit, brother, about, the LBGQ and Morehouse experience. If you can speak to that, because I just remember being in chapel with Dean Carter, and saying some things that might be considered, what would be considered homophobic, that was said, and and there was regional phobias as well, because I got there in '88, and I remember the guys from Cali still had heavy jerry curls. Some of the guys from Cali still had heavy jerry curls, and just some of the stuff. And I just remember, Dean Carter, standing up in the chapel and saying something, and got like a rousing round of applause for basically being homophobic or saying something that was contrary or counter to what it is. And you fast forward to now, and it seems that Morehouse in particular is way more inclusive and things have happened. Were you a part of any of the work that was going on, during that time? Because, I've been in a lot of intimate spots with you, and it was never, discussed. And I consider you my brother, and that was just something that was just never discussed.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. It takes a talk show to get us to some of these conversations. I say this: when I was in college, I truly didn't recognize myself as a gay man, and I say that not because I can't say that I wasn't attracted or hadn't had some thoughts, but more because I truly just didn't get it. Because what the model of what I thought a gay man was not exactly what I thought a Morehouse man or certainly a fraternity man was going to be. And I think I sort of worked really hard to craft my life in a particular way. I thought I was going to go to Morehouse, marry the right
Yeah,
Spelmanite,
you had some
pledge my
baddies, man.
fraternity.
You had
I'm
some
sorry.
you had some baddies. You had some baddies,
No,
man.
I did.
You was
It's
Mr.
true.
Freshman. You was Mr. Freshman. Right. You was
I
Mr.
wasn't the first.
Mr.
I
Freshman.
know. Come on now, you can't be telling all of this.
Hey, bruh. Hey, I
This
had
is where it gets embarrassing. This is why people don't need to know you for 30 something years. But the truth is, Reggie, I don't, and I think about this a lot, obviously, and in my work, I talk about this. Um, it was definitely a journey for me, and I think it's been a journey certainly for Morehouse. And I think that the journey is not so much about confronting homophobia, although that's definitely a part of it. And I've been a part of some of those conversations since I graduated in a couple of different places. In fact, on the HBCU board, I was able to lead a conversation for all the HBCUs around homophobia and how it shows up in terms of diversity and inclusion efforts within the HBCU communities. Some work I was really, really proud of and got to do with the National MBJC, National Black Justice Coalition. And I mean, that was really, really powerful work for me. But that wasn't, I mean, I think that the Morehouse man who is figuring that out, I mean, kids or young people figure this out a lot earlier. There are a lot more media images. We didn't have those. And I think if I'd seen some of the other people who were ultimately, self-actualized gay men, I may have had a different reality about what my possibility was. And I think this goes back to saying you can't be what you can't see.
Mm.
If I had known like who Bayard Rustin was, or I mean, any number of Morehouse men who were also gay, or for that matter, Morehouse men who were gay and who were also alphas. If I'd seen that in a way that was not sort of snickered about or laughed at, but certainly seen as look at the contributions they made to the history of this country, and dare I say the world, I may have it out than it took me to figure it out. But I don't regret Morehouse. I don't even regret thinking about Chapel. I mean, I was very clear that my language, Jesus loved me. I didn't know exactly how that was going to look, but I absolutely knew with my soul that I was a beloved child of God. And I think that took me to even being able to figure out that God was going to love me no matter how I showed up. Now, God also wants me to show up in a particular kind of way. And that's where I think social justice and brotherhood and care for humanity, those are the things that have served me the most well. It's why my career has really taken me in the way that it has in terms of working at different nonprofits and understanding how important it is for everyone to have a voice and to be able to have bodily autonomy. I mean, that's so important. And we can't take for granted that if I can tell you, well, you can't live a certain way, or you can't have kids at a certain age, or somebody else can, you know, based on some of my own beliefs, whether they're religious or societal, that doesn't serve anybody. I am glad that we have moved along, and Morehouse certainly is a much more welcoming place. At my 25th reunion, when I was invited to do the benediction for the class 5 years ago, who graduated from Morehouse, and you know, that was a tremendous honor for me.
No, absolutely.
And I know, of course, there have been other G folks who've spoken at chapel, but to have Morehouse acknowledge me in that place of being back, and to, you know, and it wasn't a big announcement on the board, you know, a gay alum is coming back to speak, but anybody who, you know, reads my mail will see it pretty quickly. They'll at least know that I am, you know, these are issues that are important to me. Well, that's what I think we got to continue to do.
No, absolutely, brother. And, you know, just if no one ever told you, man, I love you. And you have always been, you know, a great example. You know, I even used to go to Reverend Guy's church, you know, and see you up there. So, you know, you went to church more than anybody, you know, and you wasn't doing the things that we was doing. That you was always keeping it. You was always keeping us in line, man. Always keeping us in line, and really appreciate you, and really appreciate you coming on the show, on the Ask Mathis show. You're welcome, you know, anytime. And you know, you didn't tell them about the Peace Corps, bruh. You know, your time on the Peace Corps. So I mean, you definitely been putting in work for a long time, man. Ain't no faking. You've been putting in too much work for too long to be faking.
Listen, I want you to know how much it matters to me that you invited me to be in this forum. You know, I jokingly said on Facebook or LinkedIn, I can't remember now, I made a comment, said, you know, this isn't a scripted conversation. Yes, I can talk about everything, but that's not what you'd want anyway. And to have someone who's seen you, you know, when I was 18, 19 years old, you know, my brother. And for those who are not members of the D9 or understand what that means, you know, to recognize you and to see you fully and to honor your gifts in a way of being an example, even when you didn't think you were. It's huge for me, and I really, really appreciate it. So any way I can support you, you know, you got it. I am so blessed to have had this opportunity. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, and that was great. George Bernard Walker Jr., you know, from Memphis, Tennessee, made one of the best steaks I ever had in my life. You know, used to drive the blue Volkswagen Bug. Welcome to that. Appreciate you rocking with us.
Talk about that. I've upgraded a little. Love you, my brother.
Shout out to Rudy, man. Love you too, bro.
I will. All right. Talk soon.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
Teddy T, DJ Newkirk, man. What we on?
Man, it's another great day, man. Great interview. Good vibes right here.
Awesome interview.
2 to 3 every day, Monday through Friday. Keep it locked in.
X1 Adjusters, Henry Bean.
Shout out.
Give him a call.
Shout out to Henry Bean, X1 Adjusters. Got to break their live. They do residential and commercial.
All that.
Everything.
Call them up.
Call them.
How we getting up out of here, bro?
Yeah, baby. P.O.D.
Henry Bean, 954-901-4495.
That's 3. Same place. Daddy Dollar Dog. Cross and money. Ain't got it. You don't know good. And I can see why you won't be long.
One day I'm going to tell y'all about the significance of this record. This was a record, this was a record that was being promoted. I had a trial, and this record was a focal point of the trial. Because at the time, one of the artists was that's on this track, who was promoting the record, he was charged with a whole bunch of armed robberies. And so one of the things was arguing to the jury. This man pictures on all these buses and billboards in the same place that he committed these robberies. And then the victims all came in when I took the victims' depositions. They all came in and was familiar with the song and was familiar with the artist. But no one had ever said it was, it was the artist. Like no one ever said, but they all knew the artist. So, that was one of the things to say like it wasn't the artist. Because why would you and he had gone to their school. He had gone to their school with BT for some event that they was having, like Say No to Drugs or something like that. And the girls was like, we was at that thing, and none of them was like, the artist did it or he did it or whatever, man. But this was the record right here. So anytime I hear something's going on, it takes me back to like 05.